The gospel reading today is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. You know these verses as the Beatitudes. And now when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." This is the reading of the word of our Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. One Sunday, a pastor told his congregation that the church needed some extra money and asked the people to prayerfully consider giving a little extra in the offering plate. He said that whoever gave the most would be able to pick out 3 hymns. You've heard this before, huh? After the offering plates were passed, the pastor glanced down and noticed that someone had placed a $1,000 bill in the offering. He was so excited that he immediately shared his joy with his congregation and said he'd like to personally thank the person who placed the money in the plate. And there sat Rosie, all the way in the back, shyly raising her hand. The pastor asked her to come to the front, and slowly she made her way up to the pastor. And he told her how wonderful it was that she gave so much, and in thanksgiving asked her to pick out 3 hymns. Her eyes brightened as she looked over the congregation, pointed to the 3 most handsome men in the building, and said, "I'll take him, and him, and him." Our passage today is the Beatitudes. And it's interesting because when I was in Israel, there is a place called the Mount of the Beatitudes. And it is right on the shore of the Sea of Galilee near Capernaum. And it's interesting because this mount, if you will, mountain, it's a big hill, pretty much. And it forms kind of a natural amphitheater, all right? It's interesting because for some reason, when I think of Jesus preaching on the Mount, I always have this vision of him standing on top, right? And preaching down to the masses, but that isn't how an amphitheater works. An amphitheater, if you've looked at the Roman amphitheaters, you'll know that they're kind of like a circular stadium. And the actor or speaker stands at the bottom and looks up at all the people. And that's the shape of this mount, the Mount of the Beatitudes, so that all the people could be gathered on the hillside and hear that single voice standing at the bottom that was Jesus. I think that's an amazing image of who Jesus was and what he did for us, because he didn't stand on top and speak down. He stood at the bottom and spoke up to the people. Isn't that powerful? For me, that's powerful. Now, one of the ways that we could understand the Beatitudes is to look at kind of their opposites. Now, I'm going to tell you that the opposites of the Beatitudes are pretty dark, okay? Because the Beatitudes themselves are full of light. They're all incredibly positive statements, but sometimes we don't understand how radical those statements really are. And they're radical. They're over-the-top radical. And when I read the unbeatitudes to you, if you will, you'll begin to recognize how radical they really are. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's what we read. Listen to the opposite. This is verse 3. Wretched, not blessed. Wretched are the spiritually self-sufficient, for theirs is the kingdom of hell. Start to sound kind of radical to you? Verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. We are here today to remember, aren't we? And in a way, we're here to mourn as well. Listen to the opposite. Wretched are those who deny the tragedy of their sinfulness, for they will be troubled. The hard-hearted is who is being spoken about here. There's no comfort for the hard-hearted, is there? They think they've got everything under control themselves, so there's no need for comfort, right? The hard-hearted end up being troubled, just as the unbeatitude suggests. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Wretched are the self-centered, for they will be empty. We encounter a lot of that in our world, don't we? Self-centeredness, because after all, it is all about me. Most things that are trying to sell you something, most ads that are trying to sell you something are there to convince you that this is something you deserve. Verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The opposite is wretched are those who ceaselessly justify themselves, for their efforts will be in vain. And there's a whole sermon for this, and I'm not going to preach it today. But the one thing I always think about is when we are justifying ourselves, we compare ourselves to the worst example we can think of. Well, I'm no Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Wretched are the merciless, for no mercy will be shown to them. I don't want to be that person. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Wretched are those with impure hearts, for they will not see God. I don't want that to happen either. I've got a dear friend who's literally laying in his deathbed at the House of Comfort right now. And I want him to see the face of God. I want every one of you to see that. Every one of you to have that joy as you pass from this world to the next. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Wretched are those who reject peace, for they will earn the title sons of Satan. And at this point, I can only think of the Ukraine. Yeah. Verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And the unbeatitude, wretched are the uncommitted for convenience sake, for their destination is hell. You get an idea of how radical the Beatitudes really are? We certainly don't want to be on the opposite side. We don't want to be in the unbeatitudes. Rhonda and I like to travel, we like to see things, we like to do things. One of the things that we did when we lived in Indiana is we went to a state park there called Mill Creek State Park, and they have a old mill that they have restored. There's an entire village that was built around that mill. And we were standing on the front porch of the hotel slash tavern, you know, whatever we would think about that. It's where you got a meal, it's where you got a bed, it's where you got a drink. It's kind of the center of town, right, of these villages. And in the early settler times of our nation, we're standing on the front porch, and in front of it are two ruts in the ground. And we were assured that was the main road at the time. And that was the stagecoach stop right there for the stagecoach that ran daily through their little town, bringing mail, bringing people, taking people. It was the link to the outside world. I stood there on the porch of the inn, and I looked out over that those tracks in the ground, and I thought about what it must have been like to hear the horses coming in and smell the dust and the excitement of something different happening in kind of a sleepy village, and everybody waiting for their goods and their mail and what have you, and thinking of all the people that lived lives before us, that came before us, that created a legacy that we are still living with, right? That we're still taking advantage of. I read your history of your congregation here, and I read it multiple times. I never did figure out when the building was actually built. When it all started, you were meeting, this congregation was meeting in homes. They met in the town center's building, and I can't remember what that was called. Huh? There it is. Say it out loud. Real loud. Yeah. They met there for a long time, and at some point, still in the 1800s from what I can tell, this building was built, but the date doesn't seem to be there. But think about the people that have come before us. Think about the legacy that was left to us. If we decided today to start a church and we wanted to have a fine facility like this, it would be quite an undertaking, wouldn't it? It was quite an undertaking then as well. And yet here we are reaping the benefits of the vision and the passion and the faith and even the finances of people that came a very long time ago before us. That's powerful to me. That's powerful. It makes me think, how will we be remembered? You know, we are in that line of succession, if you will. We reap the benefits of those who come before us, but hopefully we leave something for those who come after us so that they too have some benefits of our time in this world and our stewardship of this property. I was standing in line. I was standing near the line, I guess I should say, at a funeral. As I often do, I just try to melt into the background, to be there if somebody needs a prayer or wants to talk, but not to intrude on the grief of the family and community that's there. And there was quite a long line at this funeral. And somebody walked up to me and shook my hand and said, "Preacher, I want to tell you about that guy standing in line." His name was Phil, and he was a tiny man in his 90s when I knew him, and he was kind of leaned over. And when I first showed up in that community, he still owned the shop that he had owned for like 50 years in that town, where he sold lawnmowers and repaired lawn tractors and all that sort of thing. And this fella came up to me who I didn't know and said, "I want to tell you about that guy." He said, "That guy, he gave me credit when there wasn't a single other soul in this town that would consider it." He said, "When I lost my job, that guy, he gave me a job." He said, "When I got myself so deep into trouble that I didn't think there was any way I would ever get out, Phil was there for me, and he helped me figure it all out." He said, "That's one of the kindest, most thoughtful, and considerate people that has ever lived in this town." Now, I knew a little bit about Phil, and I knew a little bit about how big a heart he had, but that was quite a testimony, wasn't it? Wouldn't it be wonderful for each of us if someday there was that kind of testimony for us? Then we would know that we had lived our best life. Then we would know that we had touched hearts. Then we would know that somehow our presence in this world did more than just use up air, right? That we actually made a difference. And you only have to make a difference in one person's life to make a difference. That's it. Just one. 2 is wonderful. 3 is better. But if you truly touch the life of one individual, you've made a difference, a powerful difference in this world. When people think of us as a congregation, when people think of us as a people, when they think of us as individuals, this is what I want them to remember about us. I want them to remember our love, our joy, our peace, our patience, our kindness, our goodness, our faithfulness, our gentleness, and our self-control. God bless.